Why was medieval beer considered food, while modern beer is bad for the body? This is a question that should be on the lips of every American who has ever woken up with that bloated brain fog, heavy body feeling, after a few beers the night before. Have you ever stopped to think about why this happens? Why could your grandfather have a beer for lunch and work all afternoon without any problems, while you drink 3 beers and already feel like you've ingested poison? The answer isn't in your tolerance, it's not in your genetics, it's in what they did with the beer. Because while medieval beer was literally prescribed by doctors as a nutritious food, served for breakfast to children, consumed by monks as sustenance during religious fasts, modern beer is classified by the health industry itself as an empty calorie, as a toxin that the liver needs to process as an emergency. And the difference between these two drinks that share the same name is so brutal that they should have completely different names, because the only thing they have in common is that they both contain alcohol. And even the way this alcohol acts on the body is radically different. And if you want to continue discovering truths that the beer industry would prefer you never know, subscribe now to Medieval Histories and activate the notification bell, because every week we are unearthing knowledge that was purposely buried so that you could continue spending your money on products that destroy your health. What you're about to discover will completely change the way you view that cold can in your fridge. And maybe, just maybe, you'll never be able to drink industrial beer the same way again once you understand what they're really selling you. Think about this. In 1200 years in England, doctors prescribed beer for pregnant women, for people recovering from illness, for manual workers who needed sustained energy. Medieval hospitals served patients beer 3 times a day. Medieval universities included a daily beer ration as part of professors' compensation. This was not ignorance, it was not a lack of options, it was medical knowledge based on centuries of empirical observation that beer strengthened the body, sustained it during intense physical work, and contributed to the general health of the population. Now think with me. How many times have you heard someone say that beer makes you fat? How many times have you seen health campaigns warning about the dangers of alcohol consumption? How many times have you felt that guilt when opening a beer in the middle of the week, as if you were doing something wrong with your body? This is in your head because the entire modern medical narrative treats beer as a necessary evil at best, a recreational poison at worst. The CDC, the American Center for Disease Control, lists alcohol consumption as a risk factor for more than 200 different diseases. The American Heart Association recommends that men limit consumption to 2 drinks a day, women to 1. Nutritionists call beer an empty calorie, 150 calories per can, that provide absolutely no useful nutrients to the body. And look at the numbers. The average American who drinks beer regularly consumes approximately 3,600 extra calories per month from beer alone. That's half a pound of body fat per month, from a drink that doesn't satisfy your hunger, doesn't nourish your cells, doesn't provide vitamins or minerals in significant quantities. Have you ever noticed how after a few beers you feel hungry for heavy food, pizza, hamburgers, fries? This isn't a coincidence. It's because your body is desperate for the real nutrients that modern beer promised but didn't deliver. You drank 400 calories, but your body remains in a state of nutritional deficiency, so it screams for real food. And you usually answer that scream with the worst food possible because industrial alcohol also clouds your judgment. And here's the worst part. You probably think this is normal, that this is just how beer works, that it's part of the experience. But what if I told you that there is a version of beer where none of this happens? Where do you drink and feel real satiety? Where do you drink, and does your body receive genuine nutrition? Where can you work afterwards without mental fog, without feelings of heaviness, without regret? If you're finding this impossible, it is exactly because they stole this knowledge from you. And it was no accident. It was a deliberate decision by the brewing industry that transformed liquid food into a convenience product that maximizes profit while minimizing any nutritional benefit. The numbers are even more alarming when you look at the full picture. Harvard University studies in 2018 showed that 72% of Americans who regularly drink beer are deficient in at least 1 B vitamin, the same vitamins that medieval beer provided in abundance. Coincidence? There's no coincidence here. There's direct cause and effect. You've replaced a natural source of B vitamins with liquid that contains none, and your body is paying the price. And there's more. Researchers at Johns Hopkins discovered in 2021 that regular consumers of industrial beer have significantly elevated inflammatory markers in their blood compared to non-drinkers, while historical studies of medieval populations that consumed traditional beer did not show these same inflammatory markers. In other words, it's not the act of drinking beer that causes inflammation, it's what they put in modern beer that your body treats as an aggressor. Your immune system is fighting the drink that is supposed to be nourishing you. And perhaps most disturbing of all, the rate of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which was virtually non-existent in the medieval population, now affects approximately 25% of American adults, and industrial beer with its high fructose corn syrup adjuncts is a major culprit. Your liver is processing modern beer not as food, but as chemical attack. Before I show you exactly how they made beer in the medieval period and why it served as real food, I need to know one thing. Leave a comment below and tell me, from which city, which state, or which country are you watching this video right now? I love knowing where each person in this community comes from, this community of people who are tired of being deceived and who want real knowledge about how our ancestors lived. Comment on your location, because what you will discover in the next few minutes will completely transform your understanding of what real beer is, and you may never look at that supermarket drink section the same way again. Leave your comment now, because I want to know where you are watching me from. Let's dive together into a historical truth that changed my life when I discovered it. We are in the year 1223, on a freezing November morning, in a Benedictine abbey on the outskirts of Burton-upon-Trent, in England, a region that centuries later would be known as the beer capital of the world. The sun has barely risen. It must be around 5:30 in the morning, and the air carries that characteristic smell of fermenting grains, a sweet and slightly acidic aroma that permeates the entire monastic property. In the center of the abbey courtyard, there's a stone building with a wooden roof, lower than the church, but just as important, the monastic brewery. Inside, Brother Thomas, a monk in his 40s with calloused hands from decades of handling grain, stands before an enormous oak tub that is about the height of an adult man. Steam rises from the vat because something is happening inside it that it has been doing every week for the last 20 years. The transformation of malted barley into wort, the sweet liquid that will become beer. But it's not just him there. There are 5 other monks working at different stages of the process. One is grinding grain in a manual stone mill, the rhythmic sound of the scraping stones echoing off the stone walls. Another is carrying fresh water from a specific well that the order has used for generations, because water from that particular well produces superior beer. A third is stirring a different vat, where beer from a previous batch is in full fermentation, the surface gently bubbling with the action of wild yeasts that no one can see but everyone knows are there doing their invisible work. Brother Thomas dips a wooden mug into the fermentation vat, takes a long drink, and you can see the assessment on his face. It's almost ready. 1 more day, maybe 2. He makes notes in Latin on a piece of parchment yellowed with age and the brewery's constant steam, recording the date, the approximate ambient temperature, the appearance of the foam, the current flavor. These records will join decades of observations that guide the entire process. And here's the detail that should shock you. This beer he's making is not for parties, it's not for celebration, it's not for getting drunk. This beer will be served for breakfast. All monks will receive approximately 1 liter of this beer, along with bread and cheese as their first meal of the day. Children studying at the monastic school will receive half a portion. Workers who maintain the property will receive double rations, because they do heavy physical work. And no one will get drunk, no one will have a hangover. No one will feel mental fog. On the contrary, this beer will give you energy. It will provide nutrients that are missing in your diet. Medieval Ita will quench your thirst in a safer way than untreated water, and will keep everyone satiated until lunch. And the reason this was possible, the reason beer was considered literally liquid food, lies in every detail of the process that Brother Thomas and his companions execute with ritual precision. They don't know the exact science of what they are doing. They don't understand fermentation in terms of microbiology. They can't see yeast under a microscope. But the accumulated knowledge of centuries of observation created a method so perfect that modern science, when it finally arrived, could only confirm they were doing everything absolutely right. Look at the details of what's going on at that brewery. The barley they're using was harvested 3 weeks ago, allowed to germinate for exactly 4 days until little sprouts appeared, then dried in a wood-fired oven at a low, constant temperature for 2 full days. This malting process activates enzymes within the grain that convert complex starches into simple sugars, but it also preserves intact proteins, preserves the grain's natural oils, and preserves the cellular structure that contains vitamins. When you grind this malt, you are not just releasing sugar for fermentation, you are releasing a complete nutritional complex. The water they are using comes from a specific well, because the mineral composition of that water interacts perfectly with the grains. The calcium in the water helps enzymes to work better, the magnesium improves the yeast's action, the mineral profile contributes to the flavor, but also to the final nutrition of the beer. They don't know the names of the minerals, but they know that water from that well makes better beer. So that's the water they use, without exception. And the fermentation taking place in that open vat is not sterile, it is not controlled in the laboratory, it is alive in a way that modern beer never is. There are multiple species of yeast working simultaneously. There are beneficial bacteria of the type that today we pay dearly to buy in the form of probiotics. There is an entire microbial ecology transforming that sweet liquid into something much more complex than simple alcohol and water. So let's talk about the science behind this medieval magic, because here is where everything connects and where you will understand why they called it food. The fundamental difference between medieval beer and modern beer lies in three critical elements: the malt, the fermentation, and what's not there. First, the malt. Malted barley is barley that has gone through a specific process. You let the grains germinate, start to sprout, because during germination, the grain converts its starch into simpler sugars and activates enzymes. When the grain is at the right point of germination, you dry it with heat to stop the process. The result is a grain that keeps proteins intact, maintains B vitamins in high concentrations, maintains minerals such as magnesium, phosphorus, iron, and has sugars that yeast can convert into alcohol. In medieval beer, this malt was minimally processed. They ground it fresh, used the whole grain, didn't refine anything. Researchers at the University of Cambridge in 2016 analyzed medieval beer residue found in archaeological excavations and discovered something surprising. The concentration of vitamin B in the residue was 400% higher than in modern beer, 4 times as much vitamin B. This particular vitamin, especially B1, B2, B3, B6, is crucial for energy metabolism, for neurological function, for red blood cell production. A liter of medieval beer provided approximately 50% of an adult's daily need for B vitamins. It was a liquid vitamin supplement before anyone knew what vitamins were. But there's more. Whole barley malt contains soluble fiber, specifically beta-glucans, which modern research from the University of Minnesota in 2017 has shown to reduce cholesterol, improve gut health, and stabilize blood sugar levels. Medieval beer, because it used whole malt, delivered between 3 and 5 grams of fiber per liter, a significant amount considering that the medieval diet was already rich in fiber from whole grain breads and vegetables. Modern filtered beer, 0 grams of fiber. They removed it completely. And the minerals. Analysis of medieval beer, reconstituted using traditional methods, showed concentrations of magnesium sufficient to provide 20% of the daily requirement, sufficient iron for 15%, phosphorus for 25%. These are not trivial numbers. They are significant nutritional contributions, especially in an era where supplementation did not exist and mineral deficiencies were common. Second critical element, wild fermentation versus controlled fermentation. Medieval beer fermented with yeast naturally present in the environment, which created a complex microbial community. It wasn't just one species of yeast. There were dozens of different species coexisting, each metabolizing different sugars, each producing different compounds. Studies at the University of Copenhagen in 2019 on traditional fermentation demonstrated that this microbial diversity results in a much richer nutritional profile. Beer contains natural probiotics. It contains organic acids that help digestion. It contains bioactive compounds that pure industrial fermentation simply does not produce. Specifically, fermentation with multiple strains of yeast produces compounds called short-chain fatty acids, which feed the cells in your colon, reduce intestinal inflammation, and improve nutrient absorption. Medieval beer was daily delivery of prebiotics and probiotics before those terms existed. And there's more. This complex fermentation produced less alcohol. Typical medieval beer had between 2 and 4% alcohol by volume, compared with 5 to 6% of standard modern beer. It seems like a small difference, but it means you can drink twice the volume before reaching the same level of intoxication, which means more hydration, more nutrients, less effect on judgment. A medieval worker, drinking 2 liters of 3% beer throughout the day, was consuming the same amount of alcohol as someone today drinking 3 modern beers, but was receiving twice the volume of liquid, twice the nutrients, and spreading the alcohol consumption over a much longer period, allowing constant metabolism without spikes in intoxication. And the third element, the most important, what wasn't there? Medieval beer had no adjuncts, no corn syrup, no processed rice, no chemical stabilizers, no artificial preservatives. It was water, malt, hops in some regions, after the 12th century, and time, nothing more. The human body recognized each ingredient as real food, processed it as real nutrition, absorbed it as real energy. There was nothing there that the liver needed to treat as a toxin other than natural alcohol, and even that alcohol was in a manageable concentration, diluted in a large volume of nutritious liquid. Think about it. You're drinking something that provides calories your body can use, provides vitamins your cells need, provides minerals your bones require, provides probiotics your gut loves, all while keeping you hydrated and satisfied. This is not alcoholic drink in the modern sense. It is fermented food that happens to contain alcohol. And there was even the safety aspect. Medieval water was often contaminated with pathogens because sewage systems were primitive and water sources were easily polluted. The boiling process during brewing killed these pathogens, and the resulting alcohol inhibited the growth of harmful bacteria. Beer was literally safer than water in many medieval urban contexts. So drinking beer for breakfast wasn't an indulgence, it was a public health precaution. Medieval doctors prescribed beer to patients recovering from fevers, specifically because they knew it helped rehydration without risking reintroducing infection through contaminated water. And then we reached the moment of betrayal, the turning point where beer stopped being food and became an empty industrial product. The critical year is 1876. The Industrial Revolution is in full swing, literally, because steam engines can now perform processes that previously required intensive manual labor. A Danish brewer named J.C. Jacobsen, founder of Carlsberg, does something that would change beer forever. He isolates a single strain of yeast, Saccharomyces carlsbergensis, in the laboratory. For the first time in human history, beer can be made with pure, controlled, predictable fermentation, using a single species of yeast grown in the laboratory. The beer industry saw this and saw profit. Pure fermentation meant a faster process. It meant consistent flavor from batch to batch. It meant you could make beer on a massive scale without variation. But there was a problem. Pure fermentation with a single yeast removes all that nutritional complexity. It removes probiotics, it removes beneficial organic acids, it removes bioactive compounds that only appear when multiple species of yeast interact. And the industry didn't care at all because nutrition doesn't sell beer, consistency and price sell beer. Traditional fermentation took 2 to 3 weeks. Industrial fermentation with pure yeast, it can be completed in 5 to 7 days. You have just tripled your production capacity using the same facilities. For a company focused on profit, this math was irresistible. And here comes the second betrayal, the introduction of adjuncts. At the beginning, in the 20th century, American brewers began adding rice and corn to the recipe. Why? Because it is cheaper than barley malt. Much cheaper. You can make beer using 60% malt and 40% rice or corn syrup and reduce costs drastically. But rice and corn don't have the malt proteins. They don't have the vitamins. They don't have the minerals. They only provide one thing, sugar for yeast to convert into alcohol. So now you have a drink that is basically alcohol plus water plus artificial flavor without any of the nutrients that made medieval beer food. And it gets worse. In the 1970s, when high fructose corn syrup became available as a cheap byproduct of the corn processing industry, breweries started using it too. High fructose corn syrup is metabolized by the liver differently than other sugars, directly contributing to liver fat accumulation. So now your beer is not only nutritionally empty, it is actively harmful to the liver in ways that go beyond the effect of alcohol alone. And the third betrayal, the cruelest, pasteurization and extreme filtration. In order for beer to last months on the shelf without spoiling, so it could be transported across the country in trucks, the industry began to pasteurize beer at high temperatures, killing everything that is alive, including any remaining yeast, and then filter it so intensely that it removes even microscopic sediments. The problem? Those sediments contain the last of the nutrients. The live yeast you killed was a natural probiotic. You just turned something that was alive and nutritious into dead, sterile liquid. Louis Pasteur developed pasteurization in 1864, originally for wine and beer, and was hailed as a hero because he allowed products to last longer without spoiling. What no one measured at the time was the nutritional cost. Pasteurization destroys heat-sensitive vitamins, especially vitamin C and some B vitamins. It destroys living enzymes that aid digestion, completely kills any beneficial microorganisms. Pasteurized beer is dead beer, and they sell it to you as progress, as improvement. They put words like traditional, authentic, premium on the label, while giving you a product that has absolutely nothing in common with the beer that sustained civilizations for 1,000 years. And here is the cruelest irony of all. Now that they have destroyed your health with industrial beer that makes you fat and intoxicates without nourishing, now that your intestine is in tatters because you eliminated the natural probiotics that beer used to provide, now that you have vitamin B deficiencies because they removed them all from your drink, now they want to sell back to you what they took. They sell probiotics in capsules for $30 a bottle. They sell B complex supplements for $25. They sell digestive enzymes because your intestines no longer work properly. They sell liver health products because your liver is overworked processing toxins it shouldn't encounter. They created the problem and now they profit from the solution. And you don't even know that they are responsible for both. Anheuser-Busch, America's largest brewer, generates more than $15 billion in annual revenue by selling beer made with corn syrup and rice, beer that contributes to the obesity epidemic and liver disease, and then its related companies profit by selling supplements and health products to combat the same problems its products cause. It's perfect profit cycle built on your ignorance. And the marketing strategy is brilliant in its cruelty. They associate beer with sports, with athletics, with images of healthy, fit people enjoying beer after exercise. But the beer they're selling doesn't have any of the properties that would make that remotely reasonable. Medieval beer being consumed by manual laborers made sense because it replaced nutrients lost in sweat, provided usable calories, and safely rehydrated. Modern beer after exercise? It's adding empty calories, taxing a liver already working hard to clear lactic acid, and dehydrating you even more because alcohol is a diuretic, but without any of the nutritional payoffs that traditional beer offered. The good news is that knowledge did not die, it was just forgotten by the majority. And now that you know the difference, now that you understand what beer should be, you can make different choices. First thing, look for craft breweries that make unfiltered, unpasteurized beer. These beers are hazy because they keep live yeast in suspension, and this haze is a sign of preserved nutrition. When you see crystal clear, transparent, perfectly clear beer, you're seeing beer that has been processed down to the finest detail. Fourth, breweries that do it right will be proud to declare on the label, unfiltered, unpasteurized, bottle conditioned. These words mean that they let the beer keep its living properties. Second thing, read labels looking for beer made only with barley malt, water, hops, and yeast. If the label mentions rice, corn, or worse, high fructose corn syrup, you're looking at empty industrial beer. Breweries that make traditional beer are proud on the label that they follow Reinheitsgebot, the German purity law from 1501 that allowed only these 4 ingredients. If you see these words on the label, you've found a brewery that respects tradition. Third thing, try traditional styles like Belgian ales, German Weissbier, styles that maintain older fermentation methods. These beers tend to have that nutritional complexity we're talking about. German Hefeweizen, for example, is traditionally served with yeast at the bottom of the bottle that you tip into the glass before drinking the last portion, specifically because Germans know that yeast is the most nutritious part. Belgian Saison is a style that evolved from beer made by farmers for their seasonal workers, literally beer made to sustain heavy physical work, so it tends to maintain nutritional characteristics. Fourth thing, consider making your own beer. Homebrewing is experiencing a renaissance precisely because people are rediscovering that beer can be food. You can buy a basic kit for less than $100 and make a 5-gallon batch of traditional unfiltered beer that will cost approximately $1 per bottle and will have 100 times the nutrition of anything you buy at the supermarket. And the process connects you with millennia of tradition, with knowledge that your ancestors had, but that was stolen from your generation. Fifth thing, when you're drinking commercial beer, pay attention to beers that have sediment at the bottom of the bottle. Many people think that this is a defect, that the beer has gone bad. Exactly the opposite. This sediment is dead yeast that contains proteins, B vitamins, minerals. Traditional brewers leave this out intentionally because they know the nutritional value. When you see perfectly clear beer, it means they've filtered aggressively to remove even trace amounts of sediment, and in the process, remove nutrition as well. And here's the definitive test to know if you're drinking real beer or an industrial product. Drink 2 beers and pay attention to how you feel the next day. If you wake up with a heavy head, with intense thirst, with that feeling of a hangover even after drinking a moderate amount, you drink industrial beer full of adjuncts and empty of nutrients. If you wake up feeling normal, without symptoms, even with a little more energy, you probably drank beer brewed the right way. Your body knows the difference, even if your tongue doesn't. And there's another test. Watch your appetite. Industrial beer makes you feel intensely hungry for unhealthy food after drinking it. Traditional beer made with whole malt tends to satisfy, to satiate, because your body is receiving real nutrients and registers this. If you drink beer and immediately want greasy pizza, you've drunk empty calories that your body doesn't recognize as food. If you drink beer and feel comfortable satiety, you've drunk something with real nutritional substance. This knowledge wasn't lost, it was just buried under mountains of marketing and mass production. And every time you choose craft beer made with a traditional method, every time you look for unfiltered and unpasteurized beer, every time you read labels and reject cheap adjuncts, you are rescuing wisdom that kept generations healthy when life was much harder than it is today. You are voting with your dollar against an industry that has prioritized profit over nutrition, speed over quality, convenience over health. And more people making these choices means more craft breweries surviving and thriving, means more jobs for brewers who care about craft, means slowly rebuilding beer's food culture that existed for 1,000 years before being destroyed in just a century of industrialization. If this video opened your eyes to the reality of how the beer industry turned food into poison, leave a like below. It really helps the channel to continue bringing truths that few have the courage to speak. And if you're not already subscribed, subscribe now to Medieval Histories and activate the bell because every week we reveal more knowledge that they would prefer you never discover. See you in the next video.